just decided to hop on and give my 2 cents about the end of the world. And I mean, I'm only partly kidding. Just give me a second to let the monitor catch up. I mean, but really, what were we expecting? That's really, like I don't know that I really could have expected any other outcome from the governments around the world. I mean, isn't this what we've been kind of expecting and waiting for decades now? Isn't that old prophecy about the bear, the lion, and the eagle or something? But when I heard that Iraq or Iran and China and Russia had like formalized an alliance, and then today I'm a bit confused. Maybe you guys can help me out here, but it appeared to me. Oh wait, unlisted. What? Okay, now I think we're public. Let's see if this. All right, are we live? I think we're live. Not really even sure. Well, at any rate, I'll just keep talking as if, okay, there's some people, so okay, we're live. Sorry, it was unlisted at first, and I was afraid that when I switched it to public that it would just drop the stream. So I saw tanks rolling over Ukrainian barricades today. I assumed it was Russia going into Ukraine. I've Googled it, and I haven't been able to find any announcement that Russia has formally invaded um, Ukraine, but it sure the hell looked like they were. And I think, my spider senses, I've been saying since 2020 that I felt like, I guess it was 2020, right? We had Trump and we had the beginning of COVID. And when COVID was originally, the thing with the lab came up, and both China, some Chinese politician, I don't know what his rank was, but I do recall that he was, Chinese official, and the United States basically instantly pointed fingers at each other. And I mean, this is a global pandemic. And we're talking about, I'm pretty sure engineering biological weapons is a UN treaty violation. I mean, you would hope so. What? Uh, so when they immediately just pointed their fingers at each other, um, that was an indication to me that we had some serious problems. You don't just do that. You don't just like you accuse another superpower of, having committed an error of that stature, right? It was way too quick, and then I started saying, I really think that war with China seems pretty inevitable. And then a little while back, they threatened to nuke Japan, which also seems pretty aggressive. Um, and now that there's an alliance of Iran, uh, China, and Russia formally announced, the tanks that I saw rolling into Ukraine, maybe it wasn't Russia, but I don't know. I saw some video on TikTok of, it said Ukraine, but everything else was in like Russian or something, and there were tanks rolling through barricades. So maybe it was last time that Russia invaded Ukraine. I guess what I'm babbling about here is that I'm pretty goddamn sure that we're on the verge of World War III. And it's like we've been through enough shit already in the last couple of years. You would think. Um, but I think this showdown also seems inevitable, and there are layers and layers and layers of unpacking to do when it comes to confronting something like this. It usually takes some level of catastrophe to really unite mankind. And if we're looking for the silver lining in something like World War III, I mean, there's lots of them really. When there are gigantic wars, economies improve all around the world. We can look forward to jobs opening up as soldiers are sent overseas. With something as big as World War III, massive population reduction would be, I would assume, inevitable, and that certainly wouldn't hurt the ecosystem, the global environment. And so, it's it's almost the antithesis to what COVID is doing with all of this division. I think a world war is going to kind of override whatever other situations are people are fighting about. One of the tactical things to take into consideration in case you're still clinging to doubt and denial and hoping that this won't actually happen, it's crazy how many people keep popping on and then popping right off. um, but tactically, a nation is in no condition to defend itself or to invade another nation if it's at civil war. And so the United States is in an extremely weakened state right now. The populace is extremely divided. Um, this is one of the sort of prerequisites for weakening a nation, right? For to prepare for an invasion, to cause a lot of internal um, fracturing. And so, with the U.S. on the verge of a civil war, it's the perfect time for the enemies that it has accrued over the decades to finally take some aggressive action. So, U.S. on the verge of civil war, problems with all the other world powers. I mean, you guys, let's be realistic. There has never been better circumstances for this showdown that has been brewing for decades. I would like to think that it's not true, but I think you have to be a goddamn fool to think that this war is not going to happen. And I think that the U.S. is pretty short on allies right now, and people are sick of the U.S. Sick and fucking tired of it. Um, so the thing that bothers you, well, there's one other element to this. Alien invasion, I think alien intervention would be about the only conceivable way I think we could avoid World War III at this point. That's like the only thing that could put the brakes on the situation. And I did have an experience when I was younger where I encountered some aliens in a mushroom trip, but like the whole interdimensional being kind of scenario that people talk about with DMT, I ate way too many mushrooms and it happened. And they told me that there were sort of like intergalactic agreements that they could not intervene with anything that's happening on an alien planet unless the how do they say it? Not the host species, but whatever the predominant species was threatening to exterminate all life on that planet. Like it's what I mean. Like they have to be on the edge of total and complete annihilation, and then the aliens can come down and chill things out. So I just having had that experience and other experiences over the years, I've heard other people say the same sort of things from these same sort of contact experiences, and some of them that don't involve psilocybin, although I don't think that is any reason to discredit anything. Um, I think it's really interesting that there's all these indications that there is UFO disclosure coming down the pipes right as we're facing World War III, because that is exactly what I was told would happen. Like right before we're facing certain annihilation and destruction, that they would come down in their UFOs and tell these monkeys to fucking chill out. Uh, if that doesn't happen, there's this old yarn about is it the mushroom of Oppenheimer or the mushroom of McKenna that will bloom at the end of time? And doesn't it look like it's both? Yeah, and I'm actually really surprised at how few people are talking about it. I think that a lot of people are really at their breaking point where they just can't really handle entertaining any more insanity than they've already been confronted with. Um, I think most people at this point have got to know that their psyches are basically broken. Uh, it's extremely frustrating for me because I invest so much time into trying to tell people that their political system is broken. And, people don't seem to change their mind when they're proven wrong. They just kind of go silent, in my experience. And that's not really any better. But, for example, last year I lost a lot of subscribers and friends and even family members stopped speaking to me because I was, telling Americans that they don't really have two parties, they just have one party. And, people were furious saying, well, that racist Trump, the Democrats aren't as racist and all this kind of stuff. And then, if you look at Biden's, what he's actually done since he's been in office, he's basically continued all of the things that the Democrats said Trump was evil for doing. Some of them were actually started by under Democratic presidents. So, it's frustrating to me to see that the opportunity is there. The reality, the cold hard truth is on the table. It's sitting there staring everyone in the face. It's unavoidable now, but people are somehow managing to engage their selective perception and cognitive bias and all of these other mechanisms that allow them to sort of custom craft a delusional perception of what's happening in the world. They that are able to make somehow what they're perceiving conform to their comforts, really their comfort level. I think is really what defines reality for most people. It's not what's really happening; it's what they can stand to bear witness to that's happening. And I think it's like the passage of time has made this so much more difficult because it seems like the more volume there is of error and having to admit that they're wrong, the less inclined to it people are. People really don't like to have to admit they've been fooled, and I think that it's certain that very many people have been fooled, and they've been fooled very badly, and the cost of it is extremely high. It's intolerably high. If you're complacent, you're complicit, and I think that's really my biggest concern is that I see so many people on all sides of the aisle and just everywhere, all over the place. I'm not talking about any specific group even that are just unable to acknowledge such obvious realities. And because you can't really force someone to perceive something, um, it's I'm almost at an impasse in trying to, conceive of how we can communicate people's blind spots to them in a way that it could actually facilitate holistic perception without fear, because that's key to this. It is fear that is trapping people in their ideologies and in their indoctrination and in their comfort zone. And so the antidote, the catalyst to move forward is love and courage, and fearlessness. I mean, at this point, there's so much for us to contend with that any fear that you let in has the potential to just snowball. And of course, that's personal and collective. And if it happens in one person, it spreads all around them, So it's very, very difficult to get people to, shine their light where they're refusing to look, uh, when they're already emotionally charged. They're more than ever sort of compelled to uh, retain their protective, selective perception. So I think it takes their own. They have to want to do it for some reason. And that's another thing about it. It's most of their interests in a pragmatic sense are sort of inextricably intertwined with the constancy, of their lives. That uh, these perceptions, if something were to change them, it means that their comfortable life is threatened. And so it's actually brilliant if you think about the Huxley versus Orwell debate, which I think you can still find transcripts of online, how they were both ultimately correct, unfortunately. It's like there's a comfort and, because Huxley was arguing that they were going to be controlled, people were going to be controlled through comfort and distraction and, pointless, gratuitous, meaningless sex, and, soma, the drug that everyone kept on their belt if they felt an emotion, they took it. I mean, the oceans are testing positive for benzodiazepines. Um, so, and then also this fear. So there's like this Orwellian and Huxleyan dystopia has sort of combined into a mega dystopia of inconceivable proportions. Um, really difficult to wake people up. The propaganda, a friend of mine from Italy told me a while back, because I was just baffled how Americans couldn't see all the propaganda that was coming at them, and they didn't understand how it works. To my eyes, it's super, super obvious how they combine, some truth and some bullshit into the narrative of both political party, so that people on either side are like half right all the time, and so nothing can ever really be resolved. Um, I talked about this last night, but a really great example of how they do this. I was watching a Republican politician complaining about how Joe Biden has driven the oil prices through the roof. And in reality, they're playing on a team. The people that pull the strings of the Republicans benefit in huge from rising oil prices. Like, that guy knows damn well that he is super stoked that Biden's administration jacked up the oil prices. Uh, that's what they're doing for each other. But then the Republican leaders know they're supposed to go out and act like, we are totally against big business and trying to make the government small, except for the police and the military and the schools and, all of it. It's just all we want to make the government smaller except for all of it, I guess. And then we want to lower taxes um, while keeping all of these things the same, or infinitely expanding them, like the military, in case of the military. You know what I mean? It's just so horrifically, blatantly obvious how much of a joke the system is. And it doesn't really take a whole lot of analysis, to see what I saw with the Republican guy the other day. It seems to me that even like your average Republican should notice that and know that the guy speaking knows he's full of shit. It's not like they don't know. They know what they're doing. Uh, and on the Democrat side, it's the exact same thing. They're the opposite almost. Well, not almost, literally, of what they are presenting to the public, to the extent that you have to try, you have to make an effort to fail to perceive it. For example, the race thing. The big issue with Donald Trump, other than that he seemed to maybe want to be a dictator. Everyone was always saying that he was racist, and I was trying to be objective, and I started investigating, Biden, his just video on YouTube mostly, and Trump, and all I could find in terms of like racist behaviors, statements, eulogizing the Klan, creating crime bills that put all the black males in the United States in prison, engineering the drug war. I mean, it was just incredible to see that the overwhelming evidence uh, went totally contrary to the mainstream narrative, and even saying that, pointing it out, uh, split my ecosystem, my circle of people in half. My Facebook page was deleted, which was crazy because I had all kinds of video that was only on Facebook because I just never imagined something it would just always be there, right? Um, all kinds of irreplaceable stuff that was recordings and just all suddenly gone. Um, they really don't want you to point this stuff out to everyone. And it's very difficult for me to talk about because I'm not on either side. So I'm constantly saying something that alienates somebody on one side or the other. Because you can't tell the truth without doing that. You can't. That's how they have engineered it. And like I'm always saying, the connection between the kind of biases that lead us to have these misperceptions and to cling to these obviously false beliefs are very, very profoundly integrated with our survival instinct. And when you confront people about these things, it triggers fight or flight. So if you're actually telling the truth uh, to people, 50% have half of it incorrect and are very charged and triggered around it, and then this 50% have the other part backwards, so that they're both 50% wrong. I don't know if I did a good job, but they're both 50% wrong. And so if you were telling the truth, you're triggering both sides. uh, it's and it is totally engineered circumstance. Um, Definitely deliberate. You know, it's amazing to watch. You know, the depth of it. Um, and so I don't know how people are already, COVID terrified. I'm hearing that like 50 something percent of Democrats are in favor of putting the vaccinated in camps. Um, 20 something percent were in favor of taking their children away. People are terrified of COVID, which also seems to be absolutely ridiculous. But I mean, if you look at the state of people, and the proletariat, the segment of society that is going to do the uprising, has been beaten down over the last 2 years financially. And so a lot of people's health, including my own, has been affected. People that have no resources are not very able to organize and mobilize. And so, you have a weakened population that is in a ton of fear. And now, on top of it all, whether people really are even able to acknowledge that it's happening, with everything else that's happened, we have what looks like World War III. Uh, I mean, it seems to me that it's already started. It doesn't really seem like it's even a question. And so, you know, back to the point of how this sort of thing does unify populations. I mean, I think, back in the 60s, it sounds like people were trying to like stop Vietnam. And I don't really think that is the place to put the energy. I don't think you're ever going to stop uh, the elites from, especially not on this scale. When we're talking about China and Iran and the US and Russia, this is not the kind of thing you can stop with protests. This is way over that line. Um, so I think it's much better to focus on, the bright sides and anticipating and preparing for this kind of scenario. But, if it goes nuclear, I don't know what that would mean for the survival of the planet. I think that the fact that they'll probably be fighting within the borders of the United States, they'll just get overrun. I mean, I can't imagine the United States winning in a war against China. They have been losing in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, relatively pissant countries compared to China. And certainly, if China is allied with Russia and Iran, the United States has no chance. The only possibility would be complete and total utter annihilation on both sides. That you know, there's just no way that the U.S. And it's crazy that the things that American citizens will say, right? Like they act like they just totally think that the United States could somehow mop the floor with China, even though their military is like the size of the entire United States population. Yeah, it's not a winnable war. It really isn't. So one of the things I'm going to start doing is kind of like looking at how Chinese culture is right now, and maybe start learning to speak some Cantonese. Um, I don't know. I haven't. Putin seems cool, but I'm sure he's evil as hell. I mean, I've watched some interviews with him, and he's at least like hip enough to be kind of funny. But I'm sure he also has poison gas peasants or whatever. I mean, all those guys are not good. What would we all be living under? how will the world change if China is suddenly king, Russia? And I think the other thing about this situation is that whichever way uh, it falls, it is massive enough this time that it's really going to fall all the way in that direction and not, um, you know what I mean? It's going to really set the course for the future because China and Russia are so big and powerful. Um, so I'm going to start looking at how these people are governed now so I can try to ascertain what our level of freedom is going to be. Um, I am an American, but after having traveled a little bit, I feel like America is not anything like the people that live there think it is in terms of freedom. The justice system is pretty terrible. They're worse, but I mean, not in terms of like the percentage of incarcerated, obviously. I mean, I just wonder if at this point it's not even in our best interest that someone else took control of the United States. I mean, maybe Russia would be less corrupt, or you know what I mean. And I don't think it matters what I want. It's I think the U.S. is doomed. In fact, um, I have I had a relative 20 years ago that had top secret clearance for real in the Navy, and we were living near Quantico, so that's why they were there. Uh, and this was like 2000 or 1999, and he got really drunk one night and he started bawling. I brought something up. There was some tension somewhere in the world, and I just happened to mention. He started bawling, and he said that we have been at war with Russia for a long time. I mean, China. Sorry, we've been at war with China for a long time already. It's just not physical. So far, it has just been digital. But he was crying like he knew something really, really bad was coming down the pipes, and it's been 20 years. Um, but I kind of have felt for a long time like that seems reasonably true that the United States hasn't really been in control of itself for a long time now. Um, Not with the kind of autonomy that people would like to think that they have. And what I kind of took that guy's, I don't want to be any more specific in case it could get him in trouble, I guess, but um, it's the gist of it seemed to be that the United States had already surrendered to China, and that he didn't think that was a good thing ultimately. Um, but I think that's the only, that could get us out of combat around combat. I think because it's possible that the U.S. would have the sense to just surrender without a fight. Um, but then, I'm also fairly well convinced that one of the reasons for war is population control. Um, I mean, I'm sure of it. I think that's one of the places where people are like hopelessly naive in their people will get outraged, if you suggest that, the US government is actually interested in population control. And it's very silly to be skeptical of that. Lao Tzu was writing about it. It's always been the concern of every single empire how what the population is. And I they even engineer certain demographics to make sure that there's going to be the right because you can project like how is our industrial industry going to look, like how are all these different industries going to look, how many people are we going to need at this education level and that education level. And so if whenever the bottom class starts to get unruly and overpopulated, they start some international disaster and send a bunch of them to go get killed. um, I really I really do think that it's partly conscious population control on their part, and it's also now, of course, a way for them to make a lot of money. So I don't know that if they could have, what I'm saying, I guess, is that even if they could avoid the physical war, I don't know that they would. Um, and the nuclear possibility that looms pretty large. We've heard about Iran building weapons, and we know China has them. We know Russia has them. We know the U.S. has them. I mean, this is really a tense situation in terms of just the implications of the potential destruction. I've mentioned that I saw a Chinese politician talking about this, and a reporter asked him, what wouldn't it just completely destroy the whole planet, basically? And the guy said, well, just take your absolute worst, like apocalypse scenario, and multiply it by 10, and it'll be worse than that. And I think that's probably a pretty fair approximation of what what this would be like, um, if we actually ended up in World War III. Like, what does that mean? Um, on a positive note, clearly we have to not panic, no matter what happens. And I think that it's you have to be prepared without being paranoid. Um, but I think having some awareness that we're in a very serious situation, even if World War III doesn't break out. I mean, we have all sorts of societal issues and upheavals all around the world. And, the COVID thing, whether people want to admit it or not, does have a psychological impact. And we're already, particularly in the United States, that people can't tolerate being dehumanized or desensitized or disconnected any worse than they already are. It's already become a sociopathic society with shootings constantly, mass shootings. And I know a lot of people think that they're government orchestrated, and I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if some of them were. But I think a lot of it is just that the degradation of the culture has become so extreme that it's murderous. The disconnect from any kind of sense of purpose, um, and the disconnect, the just of humanity and nature, has just pushed people over the edge. And I think that, for most people, they've either been driven over the edge, or they have it's sort of compelled them to put extra blinders on, right? So their selective perception is in an overdrive as a sort of almost as a coping mechanism. Um, so I mean, we have to take action. I think I would really, start talking to like-minded people as much as you can. Brainstorming ideas. Really, we just really have to commit to really empowering ourselves, and trying to anticipate the adaptations that could be necessary in the future. And we have to do that without fear, because the worst thing that you can do is refuse knowledge that doesn't pander to your prejudice, right? And I feel like I'm in danger of making that mistake if this is like that kind of worst case scenario. We cling to hopes long after they're dead. They're really common. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. This is kind of like a fall of Rome thing. I saw a meme the other day that said like Rome 200 lasted 200 years. The United States is 256 years old. Um, so, I mean, it's a crazy thing to actually witness. I've been expecting this for a long time, but to think that we might actually be approaching something of that magnitude, to try to imagine war in the United States, like, fighting on the ground. Well, I mean, actually, after the last couple of years, it's a lot easier, isn't it? I mean, they're shooting each other anyways everywhere in the United States. Shit is burning all the time. Cities are getting smashed to the ground by rioters and looters and stuff. I mean, 'cause California is like one big robbery south of San Francisco. That's like what its economy has become, is just robberies. It's almost already a combat zone in much of the United States. So maybe it won't be that strange if there's, actually battlefields, like legit ones. I mean, how funny is it? I don't. We have to laugh. What else are you gonna do? Alien intervention would be dope. I mean, I'm all for that. If we could get some like illuminated triclops to come down and just kind of tell the human race the truth. Like Terence McKenna said, if the truth can be told so as to be understood, it will be believed. So maybe, the sort of just common sense, um, unreligious, but, spiritual, uh, open-minded but critical, the kind of easy gnosis that can really be achieved so easily with simple conversation if somebody's really actually receptive. Um, maybe that conversation with humanity is possible between aliens and humans, because it doesn't really seem to work as well between humans and humans. It's a crazy thing, because like if for me, if I'm trying to change anything, um, who's going to listen to me? The people that already know what I'm saying. I mean, you know what I mean? And that's how it pretty much goes with all of the different groups. Um, and then nobody's listening across the aisle. Uh, Again, this alien perspective, because you can't see the thing by going across the hall, right? If you're running away from the left and you join the right, or you're running away from the right and you join the left, you just cross the hall. What you have to do is get on the roof so you can look down at it. And that's what aliens would be doing, I guess. So I saw some really funny shit about the Bible today that I had never thought about somehow. How Jesus, the guy said my favorite parts of the Bible are the parts where Jesus is talking to God and the guy who wasn't there is writing it down. Um, it's a really good example of how we find ourselves collectively in this sort of circumstance. This inability to see the literal writing on the wall for what it is. And it's fear that drives that kind of selective perception. So, that old advice of Gandhi, be the light you wish to see in the world. Um, when we're dealing with issues on the scale that we all are at the current juncture in human history, all we have any power over is our own internal being. And so we need to be courageous, fearless, loving, rational, open-minded but skeptical. Um, Spirituality will catch on a lot faster if people will start to actually sort of discriminate between ideas. By the way, we're talking about having some efficacy at catalyzing change. I see this so much, like on Facebook. It's unfortunate that our culture doesn't really have or hasn't historically had a lot of reverence for the office of the shaman or the mystic. In other cultures, these kind of really advanced masters of consciousness are revered. In the United States, they're laughed at, basically. I mean, it's not as bad now, but there's still a very large constituency that sort of views the world that way. Um, the largest empires in history, the rulers consulted magicians. And I would point out that if the advice of those magicians was not good, uh, they wouldn't have been the biggest empires on the planet. Um, and so, you know, I think that we sort of, as a culture, not necessarily as individuals, just have the wrong understanding of what is meant by shaman or magician, um, and why their advice is good. If you really look at what those practices actually entail, it's really about developing your consciousness to the greatest degree possible. Tonight I was going to do a Kabbalion live stream, and that book is a really good example of this. Where you can actually see spirituality as a utility, that it has like pragmatic, functional purpose, and that you can have a sort of method that turns your spirituality into a science. Where there's no woo in that book. You know what I mean? Like there's no dogma, and there's no like wooey nonsense. It's just all very directly observable, and you can see how all of these things function both like in internal systems and externally, all these same ideas. So it's like it's all very universally useful, and it's the kind of knowledge that's being described in a book like the Kabbalion that is the fruit of these, magicians and shamans and those types of folks labor. It actually, your consciousness does evolve, and yeah, so we have to continue to focus on cultivating all this stuff within ourselves, I guess, is the bullet point of that presentation. Fearlessness is really a huge thing, and we can't control when the COVID regulations end. People. I'll get emails sometimes. People ask me when I think they're going to be over. Like how would any. We really don't know. The reality at this point is that our most paranoid fears could be the reality, or it could be completely wrong. Any kind of conspiratorial interpretation of COVID or whatever, and things could suddenly just go back to normal. You can always be wrong. Only the madman is absolutely sure. So I think we have to remember to be open to either possibility and act in accordance with that. Right? Maybe so, maybe not. I don't think we're going to do any better than that. Deus ex Veritas. What is that? I saw something about like Project Veritas or something the other day, and was kind of interested in what it might be. Yeah, so I mean, I hope that we can somehow manage to choose places on this planet and sort of collect there. And I think we should start moving very quickly. The problem is going to be like resources for me and for a lot of other people. But I'm sure this is already happening. People are doing it intuitively. I'm sure finding these pockets that are kind of not going to be at ground zero for any sort of nuclear showdown. Um, subtropical places where the jungle really is like Eden. Um, there's food everywhere. The temperature's comfortable all the time. I mean, it's wet a lot, but I prefer that to dry. I think. I mean, point being, it's not difficult to survive in there, and the food is so plentiful. Um, the Amazon rainforest really could sustain um, pretty massive populations. And in fact, according to who's that? Graham Hancock, I think is his name. There used to be massive cities throughout South America, and they found some pretty solid evidence of that. This is crazy. I just heard a while back that the unexplored area in the Amazon rainforest is the size of the continent of India, and no modern person has been into that much of it. And also because of the I don't know what it'd be called in the jungle if the word is duff as well, but the duff in Northern California where I'm from, it's pretty thick and it's decomposing all the time, and but from the redwoods it piles up, but the jungle is even more dense with organic matter. So cities and all sorts of stuff gets just swallowed up as the jungle dies and decomposes and buries it. So now that they're able to do imaging from space, they're seeing all kinds of insane stuff. In these I don't know what they're called, the imaged maps. So, anyways, the point being that I really hope that people are motivated to, I guess, intentional communities. I hate to use that language because so often these communities actually end up being unhealthy. I'm hoping that we are at a new juncture as like more spiritually mature humans than the generation before us. I think that in a lot of cases that's definitely true, and maybe we can create communes this time around that don't devolve into weird cults, because that's always what seems to happen in the past, at least. There are not really any successful communes. The hog farm has at least managed to exist all these years. But you know what I mean? We have to do better this time. Men, in particular, need to leave their egos at the door, and just not try to take things over all the time. It's a strange habit that the alpha monkey. Actually, it's not. We forget that a lot of these behaviors that seem so insane that people do, like trying to take over planets, are actually primate behaviors, because an alpha monkey, the alpha of the troop, is going to have all the females, and he's going to control all the resources in his area, and that's what they do. That's what they're sort of thoughtlessly, mindlessly compelled, to dominate the rest of the troop, to take all the females, and to dominate the resources. So, when we see these crazy monkeys at the top of the human pyramid, exploiting people and murdering people for profit, and all this crazy shit slinging that they do. It's all very anal, and even the processes that are connected to it. Like, people are at war, they say they're in the shit. Um, Anyways, the point is that we say it's just greed, but it's actually not just greed. It's deeper than that, and it's less conscious than that. The people that do this shit are driven by instinct, and I think that's one of the big tragedies of or at least missteps of the sort of modern um, view of man, that we're somehow outside of nature. But that isn't true. And even a lot of our behaviors that seem unnatural are totally just driven by instinct. I mean, I guess you could argue that everything at the end of the day is driven by instinct, but you know what I mean. This whole crazy war thing is primate behavior. It's what monkeys do. In fact, Joan, what was her name? Joan Goodall, the monkey lady. Uh, when the chimps that she was watching, that she had imagined were just these peaceful, like a bunch of gnomes living in the jungle or something. One day, another troop came and just killed all of them, and she realized that chimpanzees actually go to war. And since then, we've discovered that there are ants that go to war. There's even a butterfly species or two that has war with other species. So it's not actually this unnatural thing that humans do. It's not even just a human behavior. So, and that, like, again, like, what are you going to do except try to communicate with people, get better at communicating with people? I've been terrible at it for years because I think that feeling the futility of trying to explain things to monkeys that I know they're not going to, you know what I mean? They're not going to change their mind. It's not. Um, People, I've directly observed this. People are able to look directly at something and insist that it's not there. And I don't mean like, some weirdos at some extreme somewhere, but just like your average person can look right at something and insist that it's not there. Another thing that we have to deal with is this sort of herd psychology. There's this horrifying experiment that was done like 13 years ago, I think, where um, they they had five people, four of whom were in on the experiment, and one guy who had a very short line with four long lines, and the four conspirators would say that all of the lines were the same size, like they had pre-agreed, right? And so what they found was that like 88% of people will lie in order to conform with the perception of the herd, basically. Um, and I've known about herd conformity. Yeah, it's an easy thing to see. But I was even actually kind of surprised that it is to that extreme. Um, and then so when we're looking for a consensus about what's happening in the world, we don't really, know how many people are doing that thing that was described, that herd conformity. Uh, so we don't even really know what people actually think. 88% of them will lie about what they're perceiving if they think that that's what other. And then if you factor in that some people may misperceive what they think other people think, and then they're still deviating in their effort to conform. Um, but that's what's the takeaway from that, man? It's that you really have to be your own independent sovereign being, right? I mean, I'm saying this to people all the time, and it's hard for people, but one of the main things we have to do is get over this idea of having leaders at all. We have to be, uh, you know, our own sovereign uh, kings and queens of our own domains, and you cannot look to anyone for answers. And usually, if you find someone that you think that you should get answers from, it will turn out that there's some horrible demon in the closet, like that Indian guy that killed his wife, and his believers think that he said that she just transcended, and so you know what I mean? Like, don't do that. Politicians, no one gets anywhere near the White House unless they're owned by the same puppet masters. Forget about that. Like, if you thought Trump was a hero, I'm sorry, you were temporary delusional. If you thought Biden was a hero, you were also suffering from a delusion. Get over it, move on. You know what I mean? Like, forget about that. There's no one from any political party that is going to help you or save you. Somebody that is themselves a member of the political elite, just last week, speaking, said there's never been a political elite in the history of the world that has genuinely had the interest of the common person at heart. And if you think anything has changed, you've lost your mind. Um, it's a very thin veneer that so many people have fallen for. I personally, I can't imagine looking at someone like Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton and thinking there's a person that wants to help people. Like, those are good, warm people. Both of those people probably see the average American roughly equivalent to, the way that you see a maggot snacking on a dog turd. You know what I mean? Like, people need to really wake up to the fact that it's not just that there's less substance to the old political system, or that it's deteriorated or something. These parties, um, it's so much beyond that. There is nothing real about it at all. I keep seeing people arguing about whether or not elections were rigged. And the most common argument on either side is that it's not possible when they're doing the accusing. So, when Clinton ran against Trump and Trump won, the Democrats all said that Russia had helped him. Then Trump loses and he says that they're cheating, and they say that's impossible even though they just accused him 4 years earlier. I mean, this is the human race that we're dealing with. Those people. I mean, it's a batshit crazy thing to watch. And it is true, I think, that record numbers of people have 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 developed some capacity to really perceive it. But I've also noticed it's really hard for people to totally, um, like, getting all this stuff thoroughly out of your system. It's it's hard to explain what I'm saying, but people have let go of it or seen through the illusion to varying degrees. Like, there's a lot of leeway. Uh, but yeah, I think if we're looking for positives, the number of people that can see it all for what it actually is greater than it's ever been in human history and all over the planet. There are conversations that are possible in terms of the sort of consciousness and sophistication, and just perspective has become so much more, universal. Um, or you have a whole planet of culture at your fingertips all the time, is what I'm saying. People don't have these sort of like really isolated, like the global citizen thing. Like, we are all understanding politics and the world and culture with a much greater awareness of what that looks like all over the entire planet all the time. It's true that we've been sort of hypnotized, and a lot of our humanity, I think, is drained into our phones. There are advantages for sure to having the world connected in this way, and the ultimate hope, I guess, is that we can actually heal ourselves and develop ourselves to the point where we can have healthy relationships with potentially toxic tools, like the internet, if we all have conditioned ourselves to actually strive for, self-knowledge as the first priority. This is, Pythagoras gave this advice, Socrates, Plato, uh, and more recently, all of the psychedelic luminaries would say this, that you have to know yourself first and foremost, and then, there has to be a purpose to your existence, and that your entire all of your being and energy is devoted to this one purpose. Uh, then we can have this sort of harmony. We are just have amnesia that we are beings of light having a human experience. Well, even more so than being beings of light. I mean, I think consciousness is light. There's really only two things in the universe: light and void. And so, people say, well, does consciousness come from? What could it be? Because we know it's not the brain, right? There are people that don't have brains that have consciousness. Um, one of them, at least one of them, is a doctor. Um, so, and that's extremely rare, but it doesn't matter. It happened once, so it can happen. It's interesting that things like this don't really cause this huge. This is like the blinder perception that I've been talking about with people in politics. Science definitely does it as well. When things pop up that are a little bit too much and really challenge an entire paradigm in the scientific ontology. Um, the science has its blind spots as well. And I think that this discovery that some people don't have a brain and yet can still be functional enough to be doctors should have been a much bigger deal. Because, most scientists would tell you that the major problem in science is the hard problem of consciousness. Like, that is the central thing, that's the biggest mystery. Um, And so, this idea that it originates in the brain is really, really central to how science views the world and scientists view the world, and it really informs how modern people in general view the world. And if consciousness can be proven not to originate in the brain, it really throws the whole shit on its head, and that has happened. That's the thing that's already been done. It has already occurred. And it's not that it's not in scientific journals, or people have heard about it. It was in Scientific American. I saw someone made a video about the doctor on TikTok the other day. I mean, I read about it in Scientific American, I think, the first time, which is reputable. It's not like a tabloid or something. So it's been news that we know for certain that consciousness doesn't arise in the brain. And I'm sure that neuroscientists, every single goddamn one of them, just like tried to ignore the fact that we had found people with fully functional consciousness with no brain. I mean, that's a major thing. That's like uh, that's a paradigm changer. Just this doctor that doesn't have a brain probably has no idea how important he is. I mean, I'm sure it's occurred to him. Like, shit, if I don't have a brain, well, obviously he has no. Can you imagine that? You go to the doctor because you have a headache, and they scan your head, and you don't have a brain. Like that's the last thing that you're expecting to hear. Literally, like you think you can't hear that, but this guy actually had that happen to him. Like he went and got a brain scan, and then he didn't have a brain. He's a fucking medical doctor. Um, So, anyways, what I'm saying is that I've been convinced for quite some time that that light is somehow consciousness is somehow generated by light, and my contemplations of it recently have been leaning towards an interaction between the fields of physics. It's almost like it's consciousness is not a field itself, but it is generated by the interaction of the various fields. I think that's It's a good guess. It's as good as any because it's certainly not the brain. So, and then of course, if you look throughout mystical literature and, you know, occult stuff, light, even, the mainstream religions and stuff. I mean, I think this is one of those things that's pretty ubiquitous everywhere that people have intuited that light and consciousness are connected for all over the planet and just about every spiritual system. Um, Well, of course, there are a lot of undiscovered frequencies. We see 0.003% of the full spectrum of light. So we know with absolute certainty that we perceive a fraction, a very, 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 very small fraction of what is actually perceptible, even. So it's really remarkable for science to tell us that we are viewing such an absurdly narrow bandwidth of the potential, um, of what there is out there, and they sort of assert that they know that there's nothing that none of that constitutes anything of value or importance. It's just what is like a priori knowledge? Is that what the they're claiming like a priori knowledge? Yeah, and that's not scientific at all. To say, well, we cannot test it, we cannot experiment on it, we can't even perceive it, but we're gonna make a bunch of judgments about it, what it's not. Uh, yeah, so it's gonna be really interesting. I've never seen a nuke explode before. I think if you guys are going to go watch this, you have to wear protective eye gear. Not financial advice. Do your own research. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I would love to be wrong, but I'm usually not. That's I'm not really thrilled about that sometimes. By the way, everyone, please hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, send us crypto and Lamborghini titles and all that stuff. We need all of it. Yeah, the thing about war is that I think in like I want to say like real reality or something. I guess could just say like in truth. Uh, the only time that it's justified to kill someone or even really to fight someone is when they are attacking you. Um, so drafting people is way out of line for sure. And it really does, speak volumes about the fact that governments see their population basically as property, as resources, um, not not human. Another element of that I've considered is that I think once a person is willing to send kids to die, and you have to try to, you know, allow for the reality that every one of like the last like 6 or 7 American presidents, at the very least, has known that the only reason for the wars they were sending these kids to die in was corporate profit. There was nothing to protect. They were not doing anything noble. Um, it was not about defending freedom anywhere or helping anyone. It was about making money. Period. End of story. So when you know that you have politicians that will knowingly kill kids to make a profit, um, I think a lot of the boundaries that people think the government has that it does not actually have. Uh, that's a big part of the problem. That I feel like it's not that difficult to understand this. That a president doesn't think about this is a Chinese life, this is an American life. They don't value one or the other more or less. A person that is willing to kill people is a person that's willing to kill people or have them killed. You know what I mean? It's I've never really been able to believe that they somehow value their own citizens and therefore the government wouldn't, like 9/11, people that say like, oh, they just wouldn't do that. Of course they would. They kindled the same energy that lights the stars upon women and children and dogs in Japan, 150,000, 130,000 people, whatever it was. If your leaders are the kind of people that would do something like that, of course they would do terrible shit to their own citizens. I don't understand how people live their entire lives believing things that are just so obviously false and also extremely important. Like, how do you maintain a delusion of that magnitude that is that blatant? How is that done? I mean, is it they just don't ever think about it? I think that's one of the reasons they teach you history. A lot of American history when you're really really young, so that A, you don't care, B, you're not paying attention, C, you're not thinking critically very much about it because for example, the Revolutionary War has always sounded like it doesn't make sense. You have a divided populace of the settlers, and then you had like the largest, most powerful empire on the planet that was allied with all sorts of other motherfuckers. And then you had a divided group of rebels with like shitty weapons, and somehow they defeated the British Empire. I just, and then they told us that their strategy was to stand in rows, and they couldn't shoot unless they were told to, and so the guys just hid behind rocks and picked them off. I have trouble believing that you become the greatest empire on the planet with bad martial strategy, right? Like I've just always had trouble with the official history, and I've always thought that that's why they teach it to you when you're so young. You don't care, and you're not thinking much about it, and then you don't ever think about it again, or you would realize, wait a minute, that's stupid. You know, George Bush was Tony Blair's second cousin. You know what I mean? They've kept it in the family as well. That's not conspiracy theory. You can look all that up. Like the royals and a lot of the American presidents have been, pretty closely related by blood. They never split from English rule. If you really look at it, Canada still has this weird connection to the Queen, right? And then Australia is its own country now, but sort of, and there's still that tie. It's like Europe does, or England, I guess specifically, seems to have this like clandestine ownership of most of the Western countries. It really does appear that way. And you don't need to be David Icke or Alex Jones and be a conspiracy theorist to notice something like that. Uh, it's it's pretty obvious to me. I just it blows my mind that more people don't ask questions about this kind of stuff because it just seems so blatantly obvious. I mean, another good example of this kind of thing is the Bilderberg meeting. This is like one of the few elements of the NWO conspiracy theories that is totally well documented. You know what I mean? There's no question that this actually happens. Um, and what the way that I've always felt like the world works is supported by the fact that this thing happens, uh, and it really shouldn't happen unless there's something really fucking funny going on. And what I mean by that is that you have all of the world leaders from all of these nations, and then even if they had beef at the time or whatever, they all go to this hotel or whatever it is, and then also they'll have. One year, I remember Peter Jennings was invited, and the woman that owns the Washington Post, and not one word uh, about what is discussed inside this building in the press anywhere. Not in the Washington Post. I mean, that woman was there. How is the press there, and yet nothing is said about what's talked about? I mean, this shouldn't be allowed to happen. To have all these world leaders go into a building and have a secret discussion once a year, that should be pretty alarming to people. And I know it is to some people, but it should be alarming to everyone. Because what I've always imagined goes on in that kind of scenario is that they'll say, okay, well, we need to manage the population, so let's throw the straws and see who gets the genocide this time. So it's like that's why the genocides always kind of move around the planet. They're like, oh, Pol Pot, so this year it's your turn, 2 million. Stalin, it's your turn now, so 20 million. Um, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this is good, but when we try to understand all of this stuff in like a universal sense, the purpose of it all, I saw someone had calculated if just Nazi Germany hadn't happened, how much bigger the population of the Earth would be. So if you actually were to calculate if none of these genocides had happened, the population of the Earth would have totally already overrun to the point where we would have already used all the resources a long time ago. Um, and so maybe that's their reasoning for it. But they go around the room at the Bilderberg place and they decide every year who's going to get the genocide, or who's going to host a war, or something. I mean, it's just crazy to think that that is something that happens, and then people still roll their eyes at any suggestion of anything that sounds like it could possibly be a conspiracy theory, which is of course another engineered circumstance because um, if you can sort of watch the waves of propaganda. And right before COVID hit, there was this huge wave of anti-vaxxers or idiots propaganda all over Facebook. And whether they are or not, it seems interesting to me that uh, you know it was everywhere. It was like the main subject in social media, and then COVID hits, and it's like, well, that's a little funny. That you guys are giving these people a really thorough bad name and making sure that no one will listen to them right before COVID hits. It's awfully just bizarre coincidence. And the other focus of it was conspiracy theorists are all stupid just because they're conspiracy theories. Um, that's just silly. Obviously, some conspiracy theories are super stupid, but they're not all incorrect. And some of them are not even conspiracy theories at this point. Like the Bilderberg meeting is 100% like people have gone and photographed everyone coming in and out. You can do that, no one can come in. No one knows anything about what's ever been said in there, even though there's press. Um, so, it really seemed like there was a concerted effort by the propaganda machine to ridicule and discredit anyone that might be questioning the narrative by just labeling everything but the official mainstream narrative a conspiracy theory. Uh, and also the flat Earth movement. I've also wondered if that wasn't something that was just propaganda that they created just to make to create something that was just so stupid that it just blackened the name of all other conspiracy theories by association. Guilty by association. So, man, the swamp is sticky, easy to get lost in. And so, what will it look like? What will it look like? I imagine we have a huge psychedelic explosion happening right now. Um, so it really, people talk about how history repeats itself. And it really seems like not only does it repeat itself, but it sort of amplifies the intensity of the patterns, with each cycle. Um, which was kind of Terence McKenna's idea with novelty theory, sort of that there are like these surges of certain types of consciousness at certain periods, and that all these things are governed by physical forces, and it's not just woo. There's some kind of causality behind the ebb and flow of creativity and spiritual or materialistic periods. Those states of consciousness collectively are due to some kind of influence. And so when I became aware of this as a teenager, I started to imagine that what happened in the 1960s was just like the tremors before the actual earthquake that I imagined to be 2012. Once I became aware of Terence McKenna and all that sort of the Mayan calendar and all that. But I don't think I was wrong. I think that it absolutely was correct. And this time is just way more interesting, way more intense. The stakes are way higher, but we have basically the same thing happening. A bunch of people becoming, super conscious compared to the average sheeple. A much more nuanced capacity for perceiving the universe. Um, it's not entirely older generation's fault that they're sleepwalking. They're just not that sophisticated because their consciousness it's literally evolution. Like human consciousness is the fastest evolving thing that we're aware of, in my humble opinion. But so we have a 60s type scenario, except that we're way smarter, a lot of us way more evolved. We have incredible technologies at our disposal. We know how to use psychedelics, whereas the last generation was just kind of fumbling in the dark, trying to get it figured out. We have a lot more experience with the sort of adjuncts like yoga and meditation, and we also have tools like ayahuasca that the last round of psychedelic awakening didn't really, they didn't have ayahuasca. Only the psychedelic elites were kind of aware of that. So, if we do have a sort of repeat of that sort of era of expanded, accelerated awakening and trying to, fight for a reasonable, rational standard of human conduct, um, another psychedelic movement, I think it has a much greater chance of being effective this time around. And, and it's not even so much distinguished by its psychedelic catalyst, or it doesn't have to be so closely associated with it. Um, Partly because the propaganda machine does that, it won't really discredit people anymore. People don't really think that way. Psychedelics have gained mainstream traction and mainstream credibility. So the media can't just say, "Well, these anti-war people are all high on these evil satanic drugs, and they're all sucking Satan's cock at night and big drug-fueled orgies." Um, they used to say the craziest shit about all of this. I remember. That marijuana makes black men rape white women. That's a pretty good one. And there was actually a video, a movie made, a black and white, way back in the day. It may have been Reefer Madness. And the guy was in a convertible and he got high, and he was actually like chasing tourists down and running them over. Like this is what they were suggesting that marijuana does. Did I freeze? And nobody has told me. Okay, so that's better. So yeah, I mean, you can't really discredit people just because of the psychedelic catalyst, but I think that catalyst is going to give us an extreme advantage. In fact, the other day it really hit me that consciousness expansion itself is an evolutionary adaptation. It's a survival mechanism. It's not something that is an option that makes people's lives more rich. It's actually a necessity for like sentient beings. Its role having been diminished almost to the point of extinction in our society is the fundamental cause of all the insanity um, universally. And so the rediscovery, reintegration of this stuff with greater wisdom and foresight, and we have the mistakes of the previous generations to remind us, um, to guide our steps. When people talk about respect for the ancestors, we think of all the noble and courageous deeds and the inventions and all of this stuff, but suffering through their mistakes was actually the bravest thing that they all had to do. And so, that's also how we reap the greatest benefit. These transactions of negative for positive. This is the systole and diastole of the universe. And I know some of you guys were going to watch the Kabbalion thing I was going to do today, and I didn't mention earlier that I had to reschedule it because our computer is so wonky that I can't get the microphone has slowed my speech down, and so now it sounds really low. So tomorrow I reschedule it. I'm going to work on it all day, but I think we're going to have our computer worked on before it's going to work. So I'll try to do it tomorrow, is what I'm saying. How to better relate to the universe is basically the point of the Kabbalion, in case you're not familiar. So we have to create communities, and we have to engender fearlessness in ourselves and the people around us. And we have to develop tactful ways to communicate with people the things that they do not want to hear. That might be our biggest challenge. I'm always quoting Oscar Wilde. He said that if you're going to tell people the truth, you have to make them laugh, otherwise they'll kill you. I've seen a lot of people, like memes, people saying that our society has become so fake that the truth actually angers people. But maybe we can take some consolation in the fact that this is nothing new. Mark Twain and Oscar Wilde and Aleister Crowley and all sorts of people from way back in the day made that observation. This is not. There's nothing. Nothing changes. Nothing changes but the names. It's It's discouraging to think that you may be able to fix something or to help something that has always been the same. But then I guess our the sort of futile life that we lead, no matter what we do, is a fool's errand. So, adding another fool's errand to the bag isn't going to make that much of a difference. Alien intervention, you guys. That's that's all we have left, really. I mean, it looks like they're here. I've seen some pretty crazy videos over the last couple of months. In fact, a girl here got one of the most impressive, like, aerial phenomena pictures that I've ever seen up on the local mountain. And what was interesting about it is that what is that mountain called? It's the Sleeping Inca. I can't remember how they say it in Quechua, but it's the Sleeping Inca. It looks like a Inca that's laying down. He has the classic Inca nose and stuff. It really does look like an Incan guy laying there. And so the top of the mountain is rock, and it's weird. I've never been up there, but it's described as looking really unnatural. And one of the local shaman told someone I know that they don't think it is natural. Uh, he didn't elaborate much on that, but you would have to assume that if we're talking about altering the entire top of a mountain, that we're talking about extraterrestrials having done it if it was several hundred years ago. At the least, I guess it could be thousands. Who knows? Um, so it was interesting that she got this picture up on that particular mountain because I heard the story and I thought, well, if that's true, then it certainly wasn't humans. Yeah, Mandango. Yeah, how did you know I was talking about Mandango? Yeah, Mandango. It's Mandango. Yeah, I'm actually surprised I've never been up there. I mean, every now and then people get robbed. Some guy got thrown off the cliff, I think, and the cops here, like, they don't want to spend money on investigations, so his stuff was all strewn around everywhere, and they say he fell. There's like clear signs of a struggle. Somebody threw that guy off fucking Mandango. Yep. And I wonder when Americans are going to realize this. That they stand no chance if this goes down. They stand no chance of winning. They seriously think they're the most powerful thing on the planet, uh, and that the Americans are so secure. Like I know none of them can imagine or believe that there could suddenly be a million Chinese soldiers running around killing everyone, and uh, the Koreans, man, the Koreans. Oh, they better hope they don't get involved. I've watched some videos of Korean, both North and South Korean soldiers doing drills, and their American soldiers would just they don't do things like this. It wouldn't even be legal. The kind of training that would be required to create soldiers like this. It's something that sort of the equivalent would be like Shaolin Buddhist kung fu monks or something, only way more brutal. Uh, American soldiers are not anywhere near that level. I mean, they were doing combat drills where like one female soldier was taking on like seven guys, and it was insane to think that like those are the people that they would be sending to war. Hand-to-hand combat, of course, is going to be a lot less prevalent um, in these battles, but still, holy shit, man. Yeah, and so now, here we are having to stand 6 feet away, cover our faces. And by the way, if we are moving into some, Nazi Germany type scenario, the depersonalization of having people wear masks, it it would definitely be the kind of psychological warfare that they would engage in to condition people. I mean, that would be one of the obvious first steps. This is why Muslim women are made to wear masks. The depersonalization, and also you lose your sense of personal identity. And so it has. the double whammy effect of erasing the individual that's there, and also discouraging recognition of that person's humanity in their neighbor. Um, so if you had some shit like this coming down the pipe, that sort of conditioning would be a no-brainer. Yeah, that's what happens when my phone gets the battery gets low. I'm gonna have to charge it, which means that I have to go. I mean, I hope this isn't too depressing, but I feel like it's kind of a big deal. So we have to talk about it. Yeah, I don't like it, um, and I'm trying to convince myself that something else is going to happen. Yeah, yeah. That when we were living in the jungle, going to town was very unpleasant. If when you disconnect from what's up, Mr. Charles, when you disconnect from society and live I mean, we lived in a house that we had internet and it was modern and stuff, but um, still we were out in the jungle. Um, and going to town, it just was really uncomfortable every time to have to go back into civilization. Uh, and I think, thank you, Hades. I I think that as you kind of snap out of the spell of Western culture, it does become more and more difficult to even interact with it. When I was first really like waking all the way up, I guess, in in my late teens, I noticed that going into WalMarts had suddenly become like, I mean, I know no one really likes going to Walmart. I would hope not. But it became like abrasive to the point where it was almost traumatizing to go into a place like that. And also, I think I felt a deep sense of betrayal to people for spending money there. I almost felt obligated to steal from Walmart if I could, you know. Uh, and I think that people, it's unfortunate that those kind of values didn't catch on more. The whole anti-corporate stance. You hear people defend big corporations on the right a lot, uh, and it's unfathomable to me that people don't see why it's not okay. And this is why the type of capitalism that we had in the United States has become untenable. Uh, you can't live only for yourself to that extent. I always talk about how pure systems of any kind, it's that never works. Like pure communism or pure socialism or pure capitalism, and of course you don't even have that anywhere really. I mean, you don't have pure capitalism in the United States. There's socialist elements, definitely for the way things work, and but there are microcosms of this, and so for individuals that are only concerned about paying the absolute lowest price for themselves, regardless of the cost to local businesses, as in the case of the Walmart shopper, eventually, because everything is connected, it's going to come back on you, you know, and that's what I think is happening now. Basically, that's why things have gotten out of control to the point that they have. That's how things have progressed to this like late stage cancer sort of um, scenario that we're living through. It really is just this totally self-centered, uh, uh, apathetic life that people have been living, that has created the situation. You know, shopping at Walmart is not okay. It really isn't. This is one of the ways that the man has crushed the life out of the average person, so that the proletariat cannot put up a fight, and it knows it can't. And that's one of the reasons it's so easy to scare it into submission right now. You know, the average person knows that they can't really do anything. So, you know, to conform, um, is the only option that they perceive. And, you know, like we were talking about that stick experiment, where the four people were in on it, and then the one guy wasn't, but he would lie and say that the lines were all the same size if everyone else did, right? Like 88% of people would do that. And so when we're looking out into our own society trying to figure out what people think, we don't even know how, you know, we can assume, how would you say this? Like 12% of them are dictating the reality to the other 88%. Or no, 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 that's not how that works. 88% of people will lie about what they're perceiving in order to conform to the herd, right? So I guess I was trying to figure out, like, does that tell us how many of the people are actually defining the reality? You know, can we get those numbers out of that? But you know, it does certainly, even if we can't get the exact numbers worked out, it certainly does suggest that a small number of people are actually defining the reality for the majority of people, and that the majority of people may not even be perceiving what they claim to perceive. That's a hell of a thing to think about, you know? So, how many fundamentalist Christians are there really? I mean, maybe a little bit. I took a couple of puffs. It's 2 o'clock in the morning here, so it's not a matter of being high or not, man. It's late as hell. My lamp died. My phone's about to die any minute now. Uh, so you know, I'm not trying to scare you guys, but look around you. I mean, it's hella looking like we're on the brink of World War III, and we're all gonna have to really network and come together and trust in our intuition and uh, really take action to prepare for the worst, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. The rest is written. So do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. The Schwar contact that I had that disappeared in the jungle a year ago has resurfaced, and he sent me a message the other day. So that whole adventure may still have life, but it's gonna cost like three. I'm trying to raise 3 grand. I came up with some T-shirt designs. Probably by tomorrow or the next day they'll actually be live. Pretty excited about that because I think they're really cool T-shirts. So you know, support us if you can. You can send cryptocurrency, PayPal, Zelle. Um, and we're really trying to, while before the nukes start raining down from the skies, we're trying to do what we can to help indigenous people protect their land. Um, it's a major, um, where a lot of the tribes. Oh, yeah. Oh wait, did it come back? I'm not sure if we're still live or not. Am I still live?